Okay, here we are with Chapter 9, Working with Groups. Now remember, I want everyone to always remember that this is just an introductory course. And so the good thing about that is that you will have a whole course on almost every topic that we cover in Foundations, which should give you some peace of mind because I think it seems a little overwhelming sometimes for everyone when we first start out because you think, oh my goodness, what are all these things we're learning? And so, just so you know, remember this is just an introduction to everything that you're going to have. And I'm having some technical difficulties there. So, the learning objectives for this chapter, as we talk about every time, is understanding the place of groups in counseling and making sure you know the 4 types of groups. So, going back when you're studying for exams and quizzes and things such as that, you can always look at these learning objectives. So, you describe the 4 major types of groups, which are psychoed, task, work, psychotherapy, and counseling. Discuss the advantages and limitations of groups, describe the stages of and issues in groups, and discuss the qualities of effective group leaders. So those are the things that we're going to cover in this chapter. We'll start out with a definition of a group. It's pretty common. And the place for groups in counseling is a really effective way for our clients to interact. It can make the most sense, especially with substance abuse. So it makes a lot of sense when you have several people coming for the same issue to put them in a group. There is great history here of group. There are many pioneers in group work. Joseph Hersey Pratt, he is credited with starting the first psychologically oriented group in 1905 with TB patients. Found it to be informative, supportive, and therapeutic. And then you have a list of others who worked with groups. Jacob Marino, he is credited with psychodrama. We talked about that some. It's a fascinating theory. We will talk about it a lot in the group class in the spring. Kurt Lewin, Fritz Perls, Gestalt, William Schutz, and Jack Gibbs. Make sure you read about them in your chapter. And Carl Rogers, of course, we know him. Now, there are 4 types of groups. Let's talk about these 4 types of groups and what they mean. Just to go back for 1 second before I go over those, there's a great timeline in your book on page 220 for the different group therapists and the evolution of group. And one that I was really unfamiliar with was Kurt Lewin in 1930s. In my other text that I teach out of, I had not had him in the text. And the T groups, those are called training groups or sensitivity training groups, human relations training group, or encounter groups. It was a form of group training where participants, 8 and 15 people, between 8 and 15 people, learned about themselves and about small group processes. Through their interaction with each other, they used feedback, problem solving, role plays to gain insight into themselves and others. In fact, Marino was, I think, a mentor of Lewin. And so Jacob Marino is the one who's credited with psychodrama, which is powerful. And we use that a great deal in current work. Um, there was some research that backed up the efficacy of these T groups as well. And then another one I was actually not familiar with was William Schutz and Jack Gibbs. They're not in the group textbook that I teach out of. And we have this new book here from Erford. So I wasn't familiar with them, but they work to humanize those T groups and focus more on personal growth. So really interesting little nuggets of information there that even I didn't know about. I had heard of everyone else, but um, really, really interesting. Okay, so let's move on. Now, we're going to talk about the different types of groups. You'll always have to know this from here on out, but there are 4 different kinds of groups. The first one is a psychoed group, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is where we're teaching a skill, we're teaching a topic, a subject. We use them in substance abuse. We use them in vocation. We use them, there could be like how to deal with a particular threat, like Zika virus, a developmental life event, like a cancer support group, or we're teaching about grief. Um, A grief group, um, it can be anything. It's non-threatening and group discussions. They are offered in a variety of settings, and we apply the life skills that are taught in the group. So there's a psychoed component to substance abuse groups where we teach about substance abuse. We teach about classical conditioning and how we become classically conditioned to multiple triggers in our environments. And then we have counseling groups. They focus on prevention, growth, and remediation. Well, psychoed can be very broad. The counseling group is more specific in that you all share something more specifically in common that you need help to either prevent or grow in or remediate. People share and work toward a common goal. It's not as invasive or in depth as psychotherapy. That's going to be more on personality dimensions, more on restructuring personality. The psychotherapy groups are going to be found more in your hospitals, mental health facilities. Um, they may be more open-ended, which means they're open, and we've talked about that, I think, or maybe that's the substance abuse class, but open-ended groups are continuously putting new people in versus closed, which is closed and nobody can come in. And in a perfect world, we'd have closed groups for everything, but we don't have a perfect world in the way that it works. People kind of come in and go out and come in and go out. It's like a revolving door for just about every group I know about. But psychotherapy is a lot more involved. These are people who may have schizophrenia or personality disorders. They've been hospitalized for that issue and they're in a psychotherapy group, which is a little bit more involved. But I know that can get confusing between the three. So just try to keep it psychoed. Everyone's learning about something. You don't necessarily have to share in psychoed. You're going to learn in a group, like a training. It could be anything. Counseling is like more about not as severe as, say, schizophrenia and suicidal ideation and things like that. Like we're coming for anger management, perhaps, would be a good example for that one. And then psychotherapy, maybe we have a group of borderlines who've been had suicidal ideation and self-injurious behavior. And then a task at work group is just what that sounds. That's committees and boards, and it's a group of people who have a common goal and a function um, to work on. So they are a task-oriented type of group. And then there are mixed groups. Um, Self-help groups take two forms, right? They're a support group and a task group, as well as psychoed, really. Um, they're organized by a professional helping organization or an individual. They kind of hit all of them, really. They're task driven. So you can see how it can be a little bit confusing sometimes, I think. But just as long as you know the four and know what an example of a mixed group is, which would be self-help, you should be good to go on that. And just as a quick recap here, there are notes on psychoed. The group leader is usually an expert. They're in charge. You're meeting the needs of the people who are coming for the topic. Counseling, this is kind of counseling light. There's some kind of issue going on with the person, like anger management. The group becomes connected and works together to help one another figure out what um, is hindering them from being successful with problem solving. Then a little bit more in depth, we've got psychotherapy, remedial type of groups, personality issues, major issues with it going more into the personality, and then a task work group is just what it sounds like, and a mixed group is more like AA. There are lots of myths about group that they're artificial and unreal, which is untrue. It's actually a microcosm for the real world. is really powerful when we have substance abuse groups, and when we train you in spring, we actually do group and help you to learn how to do group and lead group, and it's powerful how it works. So it's a wonderful way to help our clients if we have the opportunity. Other myths are that they're second-rate structures for dealing with problems. They force people to lose their identity by tearing down psychological defenses. They require people to become emotional and spill their guts, touchy-feely, confrontational, hostile, brainwashing experiences. Hopefully not. Hopefully we've trained you to not do that to your clients, but there are many advantages. The groups are really cost effective. Um, People have a lot of camaraderie in groups. They feel supported by people. You learn a lot more about yourself because you see how you are in situations with others. Like I said, it's a little microcosm of a bigger scale. You can safely try things out, like being more assertive. You can practice. You can role play. You can try out new behaviors in front of your group, and they can support you. You can learn from others when they share about how they're doing and how they're solving problems. And group members seeking individual counseling or methods for attaining personal goals. It can help you to continue to work on yourself in a multitude of ways. And there are many more advantages. There's 3 pages of advantages. These are all based on research. Helps to promote support skill building for adolescents. School-based counseling groups use mindfulness meditation and help alternative high school students enhance social, emotional, and academic strengths, can improve test scores, promote career development, help underserved populations such as battered and abused women, help manage illness, combat social isolation, increase self-esteem and hope. Very efficient and cost-effective way to treat socially anxious college students. Divorce coping, so you just see the sky is the limit. There are limitations of groups. They're not 100% confidential. Would be one thing that I would be the strongest for me, because you can't guarantee that people are not going to go talk about what happened in group. You can guarantee that in an individual session. So I can guarantee that I'm not going to go out and tell people who I'm seeing, but you can't guarantee that another group member will not do that. Some serious concerns and personalities are not well suited for groups. Um, Groups may put pressure on people before they're ready. Um, they may not share enough, and their problems may not be dealt with because of how they feel. There could be this, what we call groupthink mentality, in which stereotypical defensive and stale thought processes can become the norm, and creativity and problem solving can be squelched. So if you get stuck in a certain phase of the group and you don't have the ability to move them past that, it could be really problematic to get them working again in that working stage. Um, Maybe used as an escape for selfish purposes, different schedules, trying to get scheduled and help people get there. Um, there's a lot of things that you'll learn about in the group class that happen. People can become a scapegoat. There can be group narcissism, projection onto others. And so you're going to learn about all of that, and you will see it manifest in groups. And it's really fascinating. And you have to be skilled as a group leader to know how to deal with those issues. And there are stages of group development that are really awesome: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And sometimes these are called something different, but just know there are these 5 stages and they're analogous. So if you see in another text something different, don't panic. It's the same thing, it's just used different words. I learned these 5, and I do like these better than what this is actually teaching. This is making me think about switching our group textbook for spring, because while I do like it to some degree, I do not like some of the terminology that they use. I don't like the way that they talk about this. I think this is easier to understand. But you've got these stages, just like you kind of do in counseling when you're individually counseling someone and you start your introduction, your treatment plan, you start to get to know the person and build your rapport. Then you get into the crux of like working on the goals and doing interventions and you're working to meet your treatment goals. And then you kind of titrate down to the end to conclusion and termination. Same thing happens in a group. You have a forming stage where everyone is anxious, just like you felt when you came into class, and you may still feel. We're forming your group, your cohort, if you will. And you know how everybody was just feeling when they came in, and not really ready to go deep or confront one another or anything of that nature. At some point, that will change over the course of the next 2 years. And so you're actually in a group, if you think about it, right now. Um, you stay kind of surface in the forming. We provide group activities so you can engage with each other, i.e., me, right? I do lots of activities. So you talk to each other, make you talk to each other, practice. We make you do that so you're starting to engage, and we help you to know what to expect, help you to relax, help you to know kind of what's coming, and know that what your schedule is going to be for 2 years and how it's going to go. And we talk a lot about what did this whole class is helping you to get knowledge about all the areas that you'll learn about in the coming years. 2 years, year and a half. Is that already a year and a half? Already one semester down on this. That's crazy. So that's forming. And storming is a really good thing. And here is that word transition. Um, it's often called something different in other texts and literature, so just don't get confused. Transition, storming. I think there's another word sometimes I use, but it often includes increased tension, turmoil, conflict, and unevenness occurs. So this is when, like, wait a minute, I don't agree with you, Bob. I don't agree with you, Natasha. I don't agree. You know, like, can we talk about this? This is when we're not on our best behavior. And this is where we try to make sure that everybody trusts each other and we can work through conflict together. Um, and if I get attacked at that and at any point, that I'm able to handle that without getting defensive. So you can see how um, if people get upset with me or in a group, that I am the one modeling the behavior. Other times, groups can become very dependent on their leader at this stage, looking to the leader to make sure everything is going okay. Um, this is a part where it's really your skill set's super important as you try to help the group, the group move through this with ease, normalizing it for everybody. Saying, hey, this is normal. Let's work through that. This is good. This is positive because then we get to the fun old norming. And norming is where we work through that, and now we can work together. We understand how to resolve conflict in the group. And it's where we're working, norming or working. There's two words, same thing. Group members kind of decide that they can take control and be cohesive. We're working together. We can talk about things. We can be open. We can work on goals. We can be vulnerable. And then we start performing. Right? That's when we actually start really working. Really working. We're performing. We are involved with each other. We're helping each other out. We're supporting each other. Um, we become adults. And then we say goodbye. We work together and we celebrate and we close our ceremony and we went through the stages of our group. There's a beautiful example of these stages on table 9-1 on 229. I absolutely love this table that I talked about here. I think read through that, know it, look at it. Look at those stages: forming, norming, working, and terminating, which is adjourning. See, they even did it in this book where they use a different term. It drives me crazy. Pet peeves of Dr. Veal, but I wish the field would just settle on the term for everything. That would make it much easier for you guys. Even for your professor, sometimes I think, wait a minute, what is this? Because it's a different word. Okay, but let's talk about this. The role of the leader. So you guys will be the group leaders next semester. And don't worry, I don't throw you in there that quickly. I do it first, and then I think Dr. Muller, I think, is the other professor for that next semester. So you'll split up with us. and then we will lead groups and we will get you comfortable and get you ready for that for your practicum because most of you will lead some groups. You have to lead some groups, but you will lead groups at your practicum and internship. So, but look at forming. It's very surface. There's no trust. We're trying to develop trust. The leader would set up a structured environment and help you feel safe, help you know what the rules and the norms are for the class or the group, model appropriate behavior, and then you do icebreakers and limited self-disclosure. As we are norming, manage conflict. We're going through the storming stage right there. We're managing conflict and we're emphasizing rules and helping the group become unified. When we actually start to work, the leader concentrates on helping the members and group as a whole start to achieve goals, encourage less surface interactions and more in-depth, real responses where that are authentic and genuine. And then we help them to resolve everything at the end there in the journey and follow up with evaluations. It goes on. It's for different interventions even to tells you what you would do in the different stages on page 230. So I really, really like that, and I think that will really help you guys to understand. Of course, not everybody's appropriate for a group. You do have to screen usually for groups, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're in a system for which people are going to put them in there no matter what. But if you're going to start a group, screening measures are really good and making sure that the group's going to work together really well. The group size is also an issue. To have an appropriate group, it needs to be about 10 people or less, um, 6 to 8, and then up to 10 people can be more. Sorry for the slides going backwards. So let's just talk about these different issues with groups. Like we talked about the group size just a second ago. Um, a smaller group is certainly more effective, ideally 6 to 8 or 10, but that's ideally. A lot of times we are made to do groups with far more. 8 seems to be a really good size. And it's one of the reasons we split you up in the group class is so that you can have 5 or 6 people in your group, which is the best size. If we put 11 in there or 12, it could be problematic and not everyone wouldn't have an opportunity to share or learn the skills. Open-ended groups, I already talked about. They stay open, members come in and out. Closed are closed, they're not flexible. It's a certain number and they start and they end. And closed are really great. However, they're not feasible most of the time. Confidentiality, I mentioned. You can't, we try and stress it. It's a rule in group, but you can't enforce it. Physical structure, there needs to be a room that's safe and that promotes confidentiality, that's comfortable in a circle. It's not necessary to have a co-leader. You will when you do your groups. You will actually have someone support you in that process. Um, you can have a co-leader, but you certainly do not have to. But when you do have a co-leader, there's certain things that are really important. Having the same philosophical beliefs, understanding the model of human interaction, being aware of the issues in groups, like the different types of issues you could run into, like scapegoating a narcissistic group member, making sure you're supporting each other and that you're working toward the same goal and that you understand who's the leader and who's the co-leader. So who's kind of leading and who's backing up. Um, Self-disclosure is defined as here and now. It's dependent on the trust that you have in the group. If there's high trust, there's going to be more disclosure. There's not going to be a lot in the first stage of group, the forming, but you have to encourage it. Um, people who don't, group members who don't disclose during the time that you're together could drop out or not get what they need for the group. Feedback is something that happens as a group skill, and you give nonverbal and verbal feedback when you're in the group process. When you give feedback, it needs to be verbal feedback. It needs to be very honest and authentic. Um, be clear, concise, and concrete when you're giving feedback. Group members should also give feedback about how they've changed during the group experience. And after processing feedback, um, group members should record some of the things said during final feedback sessions. So feedback should be really helpful for the person. It should be developmentally, it should be based on where you are developmentally. Um, it is most effective when it follows stimulus behavior and is validated by others, or something actually happens in real time and we actually do it immediately. Authentic, genuine feedback. And then follow up. After the group is finished, ideally you will check in with the group members to see how they're doing, but you may not have the ability to do that depending on where you work. Okay, and then to be an effective group leader, there are 4 really important qualities. You have to be caring, have meaning attribution, which means clarifying, explaining, and providing a cognitive framework for change. So assigning meaning, these are leadership qualities. Emotional stimulation, being active, challenging content, taking risks, and self-disclosing. An executive function, developing norms, structuring, and suggesting procedures like interventions to help go deeper within your group. And we will go over many of these in the spring, and we will start to learn a lot more about that. So make sure you read this chapter and you know all of these things in the PowerPoint. The end.